continuing with the Elisha stories. Last week, where we left off, Elisha was asking Elijah for a double portion of his power that he was getting from God. Elijah warned him that was be careful what you ask for, basically. That's countercultural for us, because many times, and Pastor Melissa would have reminded you last week, because more likely than not, if you've been in a position to follow someone as an apprentice or otherwise, we are more apt to say things like Coach Liz and I coach basketball together, and so she'll come away from our time together and she'll say things that, where did Liz go? And she's like Elijah, she just got caught up. I missed the chariots. Anyway, well, that ruins it. I can't even make fun of her. So, but she'll say things, if I could be half as good as Pastor John in coaching basketball. And that's what we say, right? If I could be half as good as, I guess I need to look around more, see what's happening in our sanctuary. But yeah, that's the point. We're more apt. No, Elijah asked for a double portion. And then as we read these passages going forward in 2 Kings, at least by the biblical record, Elisha goes on to perform a tremendous amount of miracles compared to the biblical record for Elijah, even though Elijah's like the one we all remember and know. And so that's just an interesting part of the story with the fantastic miracles. The ones that we're looking at last week, this week, and the next 2 weeks are miracles where Elisha must have witnessed Elijah performing, because they're almost identical, or at least they're taking the same elements, giving them to God and letting God do something with them that's very similar. These two passages this week and next are almost identical to something we've seen from Elijah already. This is a loaded passage, a very rich passage, so many lessons that we can glean from it for our own faith. And so it's very tempting to want to discover all of them at once, but we're going to try to look at it through the lens of evangelism, which we call sharing life, and in the broader scheme of this Follow Me series. And so before we get started looking at the passage in a little bit more detail, I want to get one out of every 4 people, roughly, one out of every 4 people to stand up for a moment. So we need a couple of choir members to stand up, somebody from Linky's crew there to stand up, a couple people over here, stand up. We need some people in the back to stand up. We have to get a visual representation. We don't have 25% yet. There you go. Good. You represent the back. There, now we're talking. All right, that's pretty good. Now just look around for a second. And while they're still standing, this is the number that it represents the fastest growing religious group in our community or in our country. All right, and so you can sit down for a second and you can answer first, Jeff. So Jeff has already had one guess, because I want to know let me rephrase the question and Jeff can answer it, and then we can see if he's right. The fastest growing religious group. Jeff says Muslims, and that's not right now, but that's worldwide, probably yes, but in our country, no, yet.
Okay, what are we doing in our country?
Yeah, just our community, our country.
Scratch mine.
Okay. Any others?
Non-denominational.
Non-denominational? No. And just an interesting, and that's a good guess. Interesting thing about more non-denominational churches fail than succeed.
Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints is a growing religious group, but not the fastest, but you're absolutely right. Growing. Yes, Nancy.
Methodist.
Methodist? No.
Good guess.
And we have regional growth. Like in our area, Methodists are growing in our Baltimore, Washington area. but not as a whole. It's not the fastest. Jewish? No.
Catholic.
All right, we're getting close. Atheist is a very specific, but not agnostic is the same. But here's, I'll give you the answer because you're nuns, non-affiliated at all. Atheists, they count in a different category. This is what's really scary. Atheist is a different category than nuns. N-O-N-E-S, nuns, not N-U-N-S. Nuns that have absolutely, so nuns are the fastest growing religious group, have absolutely nothing to do or think about in terms of believing in anything, including he being an atheist where so they don't even want to enter a debate that God doesn't exist. They just don't want to have a religious conversation at all. And they're the fastest growing. And then what's really scary is it's not just young people. This is across the board, and so even senior citizens, it's a growing trend to just not want anything to do. And there's several reasons for that, and we're not, that's not what this sermon's for, but one of them is they say religious, not just Christians, but religions are too judgmental, religions are too political, religions are too power hungry, and again, they're not just attacking the Christian church, they're saying all religions. But nuns is the fastest growing, 25%. So 1 out of 4 in our community have no religious inclination at all. So it's not like they're just not involved in church. They're just nothing to do with it. So if you look in your neighborhood today, 1 out of 4, and it's growing. It's a growing percentage-wise. It's growing. It's an incredible thing to think about. So with that, we're going to see how that relates to what we're trying to accomplish today. This story about the widow, the poor widow. We see widows and poor widows in the biblical record often. And we see God acting in miraculous ways often. This is another story of a poor widow. So what's happening here is, as the scripture has told us, she is about to lose everything. She's about to lose everything. Not that she's just lost her income, but she's about ready to lose what? Her sons. All right? She's about ready to lose her kids. It was perfectly acceptable legally in those days that if you couldn't pay your debts, the creditor could take your kids to work off your debt. And that usually was a lifetime commitment, basically. They made it so you couldn't work it off. And so that's where this widow is. Not just trying to put her life back together after her husband has passed, not just trying to figure out where her next meal is going to come, but also getting ready to lose what's probably most important to her of all. And that's her sons. And so that kind of sets the stage here. All right? The scriptures tell us that this prophet, or her husband, was in this group of prophets that were following Elisha. I liked how Linda's translation put it. You know, it was part of the seminary group or whatever, however it said. So he has passed. So Elisha shows up. And the scriptures tell us she appealed to him. So this man of God shows up. My husband, your servant, is dead. You know how he feared the Lord. But now someone he owed money to has come to take my 2 children away as slaves. So she lets him know what's up. This is, again, a little bit countercultural because a lot of times when we're in trouble or we're facing an issue, whether it's similar to this or something else, a lot of times, even as people of faith, so we're not talking about the 25% yet, but people that would say we believe in God, or we believe in God through Christ, even us, when the going gets tough, a lot of times we'll check with all sorts of other sources for help, and then we make it to God in the end, right? So, well, if you got a problem, one of the first persons we call when we have a problem is mom, right? All right. Now, if your mom's a woman of God, that's a good step. Or we'll go to the self-help books, or we'll go to the local nonprofit. That's a whole other story. The church, Universal, has given away all these ministries to nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits do wonderful work. That's not talking bad about nonprofits. But we've given that away. And so then we're trained to not look to God for help because there's a disconnect in a lot of ways. But anyway, she goes to this man of God. And it's a statement of faith. She says, you know that my husband feared the Lord. And so she's a woman of God as well. But now someone, and then she goes on and tells the story. So Elisha, what he says to do, he says, tell me what you have. Tell me what you have in the house. And what she has is scarce. She says, I have just a little bit of oil. Now, what do they use the oil for in the households? Cooking. All right, so a little bit of oil for her and her two sons means what? And stop. Put it down. The oil for food, and they're down to their last bit. So he's getting ready to say, you address that. So food and other things in the biblical record, but food for them. It was sustenance for her family. So what happens is, he says, go out and borrow containers from all your neighbors. Get as many empty containers. So she's not, and again, this is not a sermon about this, but just going by the biblical record here. He is not asking her to go out and to beg oil from her neighbors. All right? So we wouldn't have blamed her if that's what she did. She is trying to save her kids. So we would not have blamed her if she went knocking on Lincoln and Carol's door and said, do you have any oil I can have? But that's not what Elisha asked her to do. He says, go get empty containers. So she must be thinking, what in the world do I need empty containers for? And so then another countercultural thing is she passes this job on to her sons. All right, a lot of times, again, I'll say it's countercultural because when we're going through something, we like to protect our kids from it, right? Oh my, don't let our kids know that we're having this struggle. And I tend to want to do that in our household. Let's not talk about this in front of Asher and Annika. But Mommy, she tells them everything. And it's like, hey, you got to ease up and be less direct. Go around the barn to get to what the issue is. But she tells them right directly. And even Lydia, our 6-year-old, I was like, man, you're scaring the heck out of them. But that's the way but anyway, so this widow, she involves her sons. And the sons go out, they get the containers from the neighbors. So everybody knows what's going on now. If they didn't know already, everybody knows the business of this widow. And we come back, and then this is where we get the miracle that it's so much oil that the community doesn't even have enough empty containers. And so not only is she able to save her sons by paying off the debt, but she's able to have some left over to sell to live off of. And so it's this abundance, this oil overflowing. And so we have this series of following that leads to this miracle. So we have Elisha following Elijah. This is a miracle that mirrors something Elijah has already done. We have the prophet that has now died, the husband. He was following Elisha. The woman of God was following her husband, and the kids were following her mother. So it's like one of those pyramid schemes, right? But one following the other, all along the line, instilling confidence in the other that God is a God of miracles. Amen. And then the last part of this following, so we're going from Elisha to the husband, to the mom, to the sons. The last part of this is the community. By going out and getting the vessels from the community now has had an opportunity to see that, wow, they were probably making fun of the widow. Like, what's she sending her sons for? They don't have anything over there at that house. Why do they want empty vessels? But now they've seen this miracle happen. And so, in essence, what the widow has done, by first of all being faithful enough to have confidence that the God of Elijah could work in this powerful way, she's involved her son. She's shown her son. We have a friend that you all probably have a friend that says the same thing, because it's probably a common friend. She always says, look at God. So she talks about moments in her life, little miracles, medium miracles, big miracles. She says, look at God. All right? And so this widow has a look at God moment. And not just for herself, but for her sons. Can say, wow, look at God. And now the community can do the same thing. Look at God. And so this look at God that's passed down from one to another through the succession of the followings. This look at God moment. So what happens here is, it's a great lesson for us. A lot of times, when it comes to evangelism, or sharing faith, or addressing the 25% of the people that don't believe in God or believe in anything, a lot of times we lack confidence. Like, how can I speak to this person? I don't know enough about the Bible, right? Anybody ever, you don't have to say it, but that might be one of the concerns you or I have had in the past. I won't be able to answer their objections. They tend to, I'm afraid they're going to point out something that might be a contradiction, and I don't know how to answer that. They might ask me a chapter and verse, and I just can't remember chapters and verses. Is that amen? All right, those are kind of answers so I'm just not going to go there with them. I don't speak the way they speak. Those kids today, they use all those new words. I can't do that. Or I can't do technology, or whatever it is. Or they're not from around here. They just moved here, and I don't know how they are. And so I just lack the confidence. I'm not going to know what to say. But this story should give us some confidence. Because it's not necessarily what we can. Well, first of all, if you're going to try to address someone, and you're saying, well, I've got to come with all this biblical knowledge in terms of chapters and verse. Well, the people don't care how much chapter and verse you know. If they're part of that 25%, the nuns, they don't know chapter and verse either. All right? And so they're not going to know whether you're right or wrong. So that right there should instill some confidence. I used to teach typing, my first full-time teaching job in the school system. Maybe I told you this. All I wanted to do was coach basketball, but I needed a teaching job. And I couldn't, in my field, I couldn't find a job. And so they needed a typing teacher. I couldn't type. And they never asked. I would not apply to the principal. But I sat there with the principal of the school that was hiring a typing teacher. Never one time asked if I could type. If he would have asked, Dennis, I would have said, no sir, I cannot type, but I'll try my best to teach these kids to type. Never asked. The department head, leader, never asked if I could type. So I had to do multiple interviews. I got hired as a typing teacher and couldn't type. I pecked. I hunted and pecked. You know what? You hunt and peck, right? And but I acted like I could in front of the kids. I never typed in front of the kids. The kids came up to my computer, they asked me to do something. I said, I'll do it later. I'll check it later. Because I didn't want them to. So I just acted, and I had confidence. I got evaluated by the assistant principal, and he put in my first evaluation, this is the best typing class I have ever seen. I still have that at home. He never asked if I could type. But it's common. I had confidence that I could do it. Even though I couldn't do it. I had confidence that I could teach you. Alright? We all have the same ability. We don't have to be able to do all the things, manipulate the Bible to be able to give a satisfactory answer, because we have something else. Every one of us in here can do what the widow did, and that is show people God. And say, that's God right there. Alright? You don't have to go to seminary to be able to point to somebody, especially to somebody that doesn't know the Bible at all, and say, that's God. God showed up right on time. Or when they're telling you a story like, wow, this and this happened, you can say, man, that's an amazing thing. You know what I call that? It's a God thing. All right, they might not drop everything right there and follow you to the church, but you're planting seeds. And you didn't have to quote any chapter or verse. Now, you have to know this book. All right, you have to know this book because this book is the clearest picture of God that we can get. So you have to know, but you don't have to memorize the lines in it. And you don't have to know the chapters and verses in it. You don't have to know whether Elijah came first or Elijah came first. You don't have to know what happens on the 6 days of creation. But you have to know God. And we know God through spending time in prayer and these scriptures. So don't get that confused either. But they're not going to be impressed that you can win Bible Jeopardy. Amen? What they're going to respond to, the 25%, what they're going to respond to is that you can point out God. And you can say, I had this amazing God moment. And you bring them into the story that way. You don't say, well, it reminded me in 2 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 13. When Elijah shows up here to the widow doesn't say, hey, Elijah, having a bad day, will you recite to me Psalm 25? She didn't say that. She says, your servant feared the Lord. I'm in this mess. Call on the God of Israel, the God of Jacob, and help me through this. The 25% out there, which we know, the scary thing too is, we know a lot of the 25%. Some of the 25% are our own family, living in our own household. They're not strangers that have just moved into the community. And we need to love them, and we need to be there for them, and we need to have and look for opportunities to just show them God and invite them to follow you along. And many cases, they're not going to react right away to that, but just planting seed in loving and wonderful, compassionate ways. And then you hope at some point in time that they hear God for themselves and they're able to point out God for themselves. And it will come and it can come, but we just got to stay at it. But they're not going to be impressed that we can win Bible Jeopardy. They're not impressed when we can take the pages of the Bible and say, Matthew 7 verse 12 says, Ken, you should stop doing this. You're doing life wrong. Or Mark chapter 4, 13 says, this is a sin. What in the world are you doing, Dan? All right, they're not going to respond to that. They will respond, and we all should respond, that God has expectations on our life. All right, so we don't have to eliminate the expectations for following God's will. But we don't have to leave with the Bible hitting people up every side of the head with it. They're not going to respond to that. They will respond to us pointing out, God, look at God. Look at God in your life. They might look at you funny the first 10 times you do it, or planting seeds. I'll tell you what else they're not going to be impressed with.